Welcome to Escapists Anonymous, the fantasy fiction book club. I'm Dan.
And I'm Sam.
In this episode, we head to the Far East to start a brand new adventure in Elizabeth Lim's 6 Crimson Cranes. So hold on for emperors and enchanters, dragons and deceit, and sorcerers, snakes, and spoilers, as we join Princess Shiori in her struggle to root out evil from the kingdom of Kiata. All right, we're in episode 10 and we're starting a brand new book. It's Elizabeth Lim's 6 Crimson Cranes, and we have read up to the end of chapter 14.
Yeah, I think it's another very different book, especially after our previous one, The Book That Wouldn't Burn by Mark Lawrence. This is a light affair.
Yeah, it's a very different feel. Again, 4 different books so far and 4 very different feels to them, which is nice.
Yeah, and I think kind of speaks a lot to the diversity of fantasy as a genre. Each one feels like a different world, quite, literally, as well as kind of like in terms of literature. But I think before we talk too much about it, new book, new blurb.
Yeah. Do you want to do the blurb in that funny voice that you do?
Yeah, it takes a lot of trying, so bear with me.
A princess in exile, 6 enchanted cranes, an unspeakable curse. Princess Shiori Anmar has a secret. Forbidden magic runs in her veins, until she loses control on the morning of her unwanted betrothal and is discovered by her stepmother, Raikama. A sorcerer in her own right, Raikama banishes Shiori, transforming her brothers into cranes and warning her that she must speak of it to no one, for with every word that escapes her lips, one of her brothers will die. But as Shiori searches for her brothers, she uncovers a dark conspiracy to seize the throne. To save her kingdom, she must place her trust in a paper bird, a mercurial dragon, and the boy she fought so hard not to marry. And she must embrace the magic she's been taught all her life to contain, no matter what it costs.
One thing I'm thinking reading that, I'm like, this is giving a little bit away that we haven't read yet.
Yeah.
For one, I didn't realise that Raikama had realised that Shiori was magic when she ran away from the betrothal. The way that ties up, that doesn't work with the events that I read.
No, that wasn't my interpretation of what happened at all.
But it could turn out that later on in the book we find out that this was when I realised, but that's giving away information that we might not get until much later.
We're probably going to jump too far into it, so we won't go into that just yet. But, I mean, it definitely gives away more than where we've read up to, doesn't it? It tells you where we're heading to.
Only on reflection does it give away more than I think it should. But if you haven't read the book, you wouldn't know.
I think it probably speaks to how much we've still got left to find out. Because I think actually, as your recap that you're probably just about to do will tell us, we've covered a huge amount of ground in the first 14 chapters.
Yeah, this is the first third of the book. And it's interesting because it feels like a lot, but also it didn't feel like a lot. Like if I was to sum this up in 1 or 2 sentences, easy. Going into it just to provide a bit more detail, suddenly everything unravels and you have to provide a lot more. But let me run through it. So, Shiori Anmar, the youngest of Emperor Hanryu's 7 children and his only daughter, is about to meet her new fiancé. However, things go a bit awry when she panics about the potential marriage and decides she has to flee the ceremony to find her secret pet, an origami bird called Kiki that she brought to life with wild magic, a talent which we must keep hidden because use of magic is forbidden in the kingdom. She finds Kiki floating in the sacred lake and dives in to get her, forgetting that she's wearing many layers of ceremonial robes, which promptly drag her under the surface of the lake and towards a watery death. However, she's seemingly saved by a dragon who is living in the sacred lake. Recovering after her near drowning, she tries to tell her brothers that she was saved by this dragon, but none of them believe her. They are all annoyed at her foolishness to varying degrees, as is her father, who feels she has humiliated Lord Bushan and his son, to whom she is supposed to be betrothed. As punishment, she must create a tapestry under the supervision of her mysterious stepmother, Raikama, which will then be sent to Lord Bushan as an apology. Her stepmother discovers Kiki, the paper bird, on Shiori's bed and tears her to shreds. Over the following weeks, she slowly works on the tapestry, stuck with her stepmother Raikama, who seems to not like her. On the day of the summer festival, she is granted a slight reprieve, and her father lets her attend. While there, she is accosted by a young man who runs off with her food. She chases him down, discovers he is in fact the young dragon who saved her. His name is Seiryu, and claims to be part of dragon royalty. He has taken human form in order to have fun among the humans. He and Shiori form a playfully antagonistic friendship, and he says he will teach her magic in secret, including how to bring Kiki back to life. But he mentions that her magic is wild, and that one day it will be dangerous. Over the following weeks, he teaches her basic spells and enchantments, and Shiori uses one to speed up the sewing of the tapestry so that she can get out from under Raikama's supervision. Seiryu tells Shiori that he has to leave to return to his grandfather's court deep under the water in the Taijin Sea, but before he does, he reveals that he saved Shiori by giving her a piece of his dragon pearl, which every dragon has and is the source of their magic. He shows Shiori how to restore Kiki to life, and he tells Shiori that Raikama, despite her apparent hatred of magic, is in fact a sorceress. As autumn approaches, Shiori is bored, her brothers are all busy with their duties, and she misses Seiryu. Sitting by the sacred lake, she spots a sash which was gifted to her by her betrothed, which she lost when she almost drowned. She retrieves it. Previously, Raikama had asked about its whereabouts. She takes it to Raikama, who feigns disinterest, but takes it from Shiori's room. Shiori sneaks into the snake garden, which is a private space for Raikama in her own private quarters, and sees Raikama carrying the sash into a secret tunnel under the pond in her garden. She follows her and finds herself in a forest in the mountains far away from the palace. Raikama performs a spell using the sash. She summons forth forms of Shiori and her siblings, which then form into 7 black shadow snakes, which apparently hiss, "Shiori, die, Shiori." Panicking, Shiori tries to flee but is discovered by Raikama. Raikama attempts to enchant Shiori, but she fights back, steals the magical ball of yarn, which she uses to help her get back to the palace. Shiori rushes to the palace, tells her brothers everything. Despite their initial skepticism, they believe everything when Raikama turns up and tries to use her magic on all of them to make them forget about what Shiori said. They team up to fight her, but Raikama turns the 6 brothers into cranes and places a curse upon Shiori using a walnut bowl. Shiori awakens on the isolated island of Tianyi in the north of the kingdom. The curse placed upon her means she has a wooden bowl stuck over her face, obscuring her identity, and for every word she speaks, one of her brothers will die. While attempting to steal a boat to the mainland, she is apprehended by the owner of the Sparrow Inn, Mrs. Dinan, and forced into servitude for several months as a serving girl. During this time, she has a dream of her brothers flying over the palace, being attacked by archers who are commanded by her father, who is being magically influenced by Raikama. She resolves to get money to buy a boat and sail to the mainland. Soon after, a sentinel, an elite soldier who works directly for the emperor, stops at the inn. He has been sent on a search for Shiori, but of course doesn't recognize her because of the bowl. Despite his kindness towards her, she sneaks into his room to search for money to take. During this search, she finds a slipper she lost when she awoke on the island and a letter from the rival kingdom of Alandi, which mentions a plan to use poison, seemingly against the emperor. The sentinel discovers Shiori, but rather than punish her, decides to give her the money anyway. The following day, another sentinel arrives. He is brutal and cruel and is revealed to be Takan, the man to whom Shiori was supposed to be betrothed. He and Takan leave together. The next morning, Shiori flees the inn, buys a boat, sets sail. It takes her 9 days to reach the mainland. She arrives at Zhenzha, the never-ending forest. She sails upriver and spots her brothers flying overhead. She goes to call for them, but doesn't spot that she's about to fall over a waterfall. Just as she's about to plummet to her death, her brothers swoop down and save her. They carry her to a cave, and as night falls, they transform into humans again. They are happy to be reunited with their sister and tell her what they know. Their father can no longer recognize them, and they cannot approach the palace for fear of being attacked. They have enlisted the help of an enchanter called Master Sring, who has given them a magic satchel for Shiori to use. In return, Master Sring wants the dragon pearl that is the source of Raikama's power. In order to defeat her, Shiori needs to find out Raikama's name. And to make matters worse, the kingdom is now at war with Alandi. Breathe. So, loads going on.
Yeah.
One thing that really struck me with how this book is written is that sometimes quite major things can be dealt with very, very briefly.
Yeah.
And so when you're describing it, you're like, well, this happened. The book spent about a paragraph mentioning it, but it needs to be covered. And I think one of the ones that stuck out to me most was when Shiori resurrected Kiki, because it gets about a sentence and it's like her discovering the next level of magical power that she can use. But it goes, and before too long, Kiki was resurrected. It's like, do you want to describe how that happened?
Yeah. There's a bit of that with Seiryu and his tuition of Shiori and magic, where it's just like, you know how to do this, just believe it and it will happen. And she just says, live, and it lives.
Also, magic, it's so tied in with names and words again, isn't it? Like very similar to, as we mentioned before, the name of the wind. Words have power. So Raikama's name, the fact that no one knows it, means that it's clearly this really important thing to her that she keeps hidden, which I think is also indicative of her being someone who uses magic, because she understands the importance of no one knowing her name.
Yeah.
And with magic being such an intrinsic part of this book, I really enjoyed how it was used.
I've got lots of questions about whether we're going to find out more about the basis of Shiori's magic, whether it's something to do with her mother, who obviously passed away, and whether there's something there. Obviously, Seiryu says that she has this power and magic. How will that manifest? Obviously, she had this power before she had the Dragon's Pearl Seiryu used to save her life. Does that make her even more powerful?
Well, we don't yet know if Raikama had magic before she got the pearl, but we know that it's clearly made her very powerful. And I'd be interested to see whether this means that Shiori's and Raikama's magic is inherently different. Like if Shiori's can exist without the pearl fragment.
I think the other thing I like about the building of the magical world is this idea of the demons being trapped in the mountain, and the humans prayed to the gods, who then instructed the dragons to help them trap the demons in the mountain. And that's something that I don't know whether it is a sort of Eastern mythological thing more broadly, because I read the Poppy Wars trilogy by R.F. Kuang, and there's this thing about powerful, out-of-control gods being trapped in a mountain, and that was the only way to prevent their powers from wreaking havoc. So it seems to be this theme across...
That's interesting.
Across kind of Eastern...
I wonder if it draws from a famous myth that we don't know about. But of course, you could also imagine, like, particularly with something like Shinto in Japan, where the gods are tied to geographical features. With so many mythologies, folk traditions, it's tied to the geography. And if you're living in a mountainous region, these things that dominate the skyline will, of course, hold tremendous power in some form or another when it ties into your mythology.
Yeah, I liked that. And I like the fact that there seems to be lots of uncertainty, and obviously within the story itself, local myths and interpretations of what demons look like and who they are, but we haven't actually encountered a demon. And I hope that at some point in the story that becomes something that we do encounter.
Well, this Master String sounds like an interesting character, because we've heard so far, Seiryu was saying, oh, these enchanters, they become warped over time. It's almost like a warlock in D&D gets their powers from making an agreement, but there's a trade-off for the power that they get.
And he says that they're basically like one step removed from being a demon, doesn't he?
Yeah, one mistake, or they fall too much into using the magic and it transforms them. So it just means we know that our characters will always have to tread that fine line.
Yeah.
Perhaps in this context, there's an inherently feminine element to it. The magic users we see among humans are women. The female characters in this book are not just the protagonists, but also the antagonists. They're the most active people within the story. And this is not just Shiori and Raikama, but you kind of think about Mrs. Dainan, who is kind of like a lower level version of Raikama, this antagonistic woman who controls all the men on the island. She tells them what to do. She has a power and a position. Whereas you look at the brothers, while they're all very loving and friendly, they're also very distant and absent. It's the same with the father. So much of the story is Shiori on her own, and you hear about what her brothers are up to. You understand her father is a powerful emperor, commanding armies, dealing with politics, but we don't see any of it. No. It's all entirely absent, which makes them very passive within the story that we're reading.
Yeah. We get the sense from Shiori that she's still really getting to grips with why they're being pulled away in different directions, and she doesn't get to see them as much, and that's a source of pain for her. But the thing that made me laugh was when she's reunited with them, and when they rescue her from falling over the waterfall and they take her back to their base of operation, the first thing is, thank God a female's here, they can take over the cooking. I was like, oh.
Yeah, it shows the existing power structures of the kingdom, And it's a statement upon that, about Shiori's position. At the start of the book, she's about to be married off. She has no agency. And I kind of feel the arc of this storyline is going to be, she has wealth and in theory power. Like she's going to go off to this new kingdom and she's going to run a household, but she doesn't really have any agency. Like the magic is this source of what could be a potential power for her.
Yeah.
But of course it's repressed within the kingdom. And it's women who have this magic by the sounds of it. I wouldn't be surprised if we found out that enchanters are largely male and they have this corrupting, weird, twisting form of it, whereas women have a more wild magic that doesn't do that, but it is repressed and it's not liked by the male power structure within the kingdom. But it's only when she arrives on the island and she starts to learn that she has all these other skills that she's never really engaged with. Not only is she a good cook, but she's also very clever. She knows potential routes to get hold of this money. I know how I'm going to do all of this. She's being forged to have other skills so that when she eventually gets her magic back, it's exponentially more powerful because she's been strengthened as a person.
I mean, I'm not sure that her skills for gaining money or access were incredibly
she got
well demonstrated. I mean, she got caught twice in the act of trying to steal to gain her escape from the island, didn't she? But my impression of her to start with was she was likable, but she was quite spoiled and entitled. And I don't think yet we have got a sense that like she's gained this self-awareness about how privileged that she was beforehand, or whether that's going to be a relevant part of the story. But I think the fact that she's at least had some adversity to overcome makes her more likable and more relatable as a main character.
Yeah. And I think the curse that placed upon her in some ways is really enjoyable in terms of how it works, because it seems like such a classic fairy tale, arbitrary curse. But it ties in with the metaphor of the magic, and also her sources of power are her magic and who she is. And both of them are stripped away in very literal ways. She cannot speak. No one can see her face.
Yeah, it's very comprehensive in the way that it actually works. But yeah, I think like you say, it's the fairy tale element, and even that extension to the way the brothers curse works is really interesting. And what I liked was it kind of answered all the questions. Why don't they just do this? Why don't they just, well, they can't because X, Y, and Z.
Yeah.
And there weren't actual loopholes in that, which I'm always pleased about. I think Elizabeth Lim's kind of ticked all the boxes there.
Yeah. And kudos to Raikama for, in that moment, she's like, well, this plan's gone tits up. Better turn them into cranes, put a bowl on her head, and I better cover all the loopholes while I'm at it. One of the things I've picked up with Raikama, and I really like her as an antagonist already, is that there's this implied past. She's got the scar on her face that seemingly makes her even more beautiful, despite the fact that there's some kind of blemish on her. But beyond that, like this dark past she's run away from, who is she escaped from? What was she doing before? Is all of the stuff she's doing to Shiori and her brothers a way for her to seek her own survival, because she is herself threatened? I mean, she is a magic user, so we know this is automatically something that she'll be worried about. But also, will it turn out she's like, I'm really sorry I was forced to do all of this because I just had to make sure that the people who were hunting me didn't find me. And so like they're mistakes made by a desperate woman rather than someone who's inherently evil.
I think with Raikama, her backstory could be really interesting, and it could just go down she's working for another kingdom. We've had that implied in the blurb that there's a power struggle for...
Yeah, is she working for the other kingdom they've just gone to war with, Alandi?
But my other question about her is, obviously she has this dragon pearl as well. We've only met one dragon, which is Seryu. So obviously he's going to return at some point.
Yep.
So does he know more about Raikama than he's letting on? Is his family connected with her in some way? Is it his grandfather?
His grandfather's the king.
The king emperor of the dragons. And maybe there's a connection there where it's going to cause this conflict with Shiori where she likes Seryu, but they're sort of pulled in different directions by their allegiances, or things like that, where there's an opportunity to add complexity to the nature of these.
Yeah, well, because we know there's an inherent hostility between the humans of Kiata and the dragons, because you look at how they're describing each other. Dragons go back on every single promise they've ever made. And, humans are like pigs. There is an animosity there, which goes back a long time to the point where magic was forced out of this kingdom. I think that creates a good narrative barrier as to why, if Shiori beseeches Seiryu, like, get your family to help, why there might be a reason that they can't help.
I mean, I'm just sort of thinking back to Raikama and thinking, could she be a dragon? And actually the power struggle is between the dragons and humans. Because obviously we know that dragons can take human form. We know that dragons have these pearls and she's got one of them. Does it become more complex than...
Yeah, and her eyes went...
Yeah,
because
she becomes almost
you had a red band for his iris, and hers go yellow when she starts to use magic.
And it says about her almost looking like she's got scaly skin. And obviously she's surrounded by snakes, and so the assumption is something to do with snakes, but I'm thinking more just reptilian.
I mean, certainly that's a decent theory that she could be a dragon. But I think it was interesting as well that her pearl was shattered, wasn't it? Like when she saw it glowing, it was a broken pearl. It was a broken glowing sphere. So I don't know if maybe she's trapped in human form or something.
Could be. Yeah.
I mean, I'm less sure of it now that you've said that, but my instinct was to think that she'd stolen it from a dragon.
Yeah. I think my initial instinct was that because we've had the mention of Seiryu's grandfather a few times now, is that there's going to be some link between Raikama and the King of the Dragons, and whether that's a conflict or a collaboration, that remains to be seen. The way she holds herself, she doesn't seem to engage in the same type of human emotional spectrum stuff as other people. The way that she can just sit and sew for hours, and just the way that she reacts to things is very cold and separated.
The way I interpreted that was the idea that, like, and you see it in the real world as well, people who for their survival have to become disciplined. It's that kind of like, there's an abnormality in someone that doesn't conform to society, and they have to learn to construct a new person to hide that element of her. She has to be disciplined. She cannot enjoy herself, because if she does, if she allows herself to have that moment, then it might all come out.
Or could it be that, like Seiryu says, sitting and sewing for hours at a time for a dragon would seem like a couple of seconds based on the span of their lifestyle? So it's actually not this arduous thing that Shiori would perceive it as.
Although, was there any implication that Raikama has aged over the years? Like, did it mention that? No, she just remains immutable.
This kind of beautiful, distant character, I guess.
Yeah.
What's her name supposed to mean?
Nameless Queen.
Nameless Queen. Yeah. I mean, that's super suspicious.
Yeah. Yeah. It is playing upon that wicked stepmother trope.
Yeah, very fairy tale.
Yeah, because it draws on a whole bunch of stuff, because you've got like this idea that they're inherently evil, but of course that stems from the Brothers Grimm in the Western tradition, this idea, because they bloody hated their stepmother. That's why there's so many wicked stepmothers. But you see it all the time in various tropes. I'm kind of looking for where this book is heading, for an element of it to be upended. Because, you look at historiography from medieval Europe, and there's so many times going, when the king made that mistake, it was because that wicked queen did it. She was whispering in his ear this whole time. And so it's a trope that we can all instantly relate to, but do we see those expectations set up at the start in the hope that they're upended and we'll learn something new? There's even character growth. There's a chance for redemption, rather than it's moralistic, she's inherently evil, and therefore she has to be defeated by the end of it. I'm looking towards something like that.
I think I would have more faith or more optimism about the idea of it being subverted if she hadn't turned the brothers to cranes and put a bowl on Shiori's head and sent her off to this remote island in the north.
I'm telling you, she is a woman under fire, all right? She's doing what she can to survive.
She's misunderstood, guys.
I know. Like, you're right. It's probably going to turn out that I'm reading too much into it, and she's just, at the end of the day, she's just
I'd be more than happy if there's a good explanation as to what her motivations are, or like whether she is working with somebody else, and whether that kind of provides a good backstory. I mean, sometimes subverting is about subverting the assumed pathway to subversion, isn't it? It's like double bluff.
Yeah, so this is postmodern.
Yeah, so you thought we were going to subvert your expectations, but by not subverting your expectations, we subverted your expectations.
You got me, Elizabeth Lim. Hook, line and sinker.
Yeah. There's a bit, and I just had to mention this because it almost made my eyes pop out of my head whilst I was, trying desperately to buy into the world, where she meets Seryu for the first time when he's, stealing all the food and she's chased after him. And she's like, "Oh, you're the dragon that saved my life in human form." Then she's like, "Right, well, I'm back off to the..." She just gets up to walk off. I was like...
The kite competition, Dan. She got to get back to the kite competition.
I was like, is this such an everyday occurrence that she's just like...
I've read some Japanese mythology, and people do tend to take it in their stride when a demon walks in. They're like, oh, it's a blooming Oni right here. Oh, okay, fine. Well, I'll roll with that. So maybe it was like playing upon that idea that there's the acceptance that it all exists, but not really fully contextualizing within the kingdom that she's created, which is you don't see magic. But then maybe it's the naivety of Shiori.
I don't know. I was just like, what? Like, who gets up to walk away?
I do feel sometimes that Shiori, particularly as a protagonist, doesn't act in ways that I would. And I did find that sometimes quite frustrating. And you're just kind of like, is it because she's just a very different character, or is she acting counterintuitively from what any sensible human being would do? And we're supposed to believe that she's on some level quite canny and she can figure a way out of these problems. I was confused about why she didn't go with the Sentinel when he's like, "Come with me to this kingdom." It's like, you don't even have to take the money. You could just keep that for another thing. Just go with them. What's the problem?
You're assuming that you sailing a boat for 9 days on like the
How was that
open
easier?
sea.
While we're talking about the sea and the boat sequence, I do have a bit of a weird question. Tell me if I'm completely off with this. I don't think Elizabeth Lim knows how rivers and waterfalls work, because Shiori goes along the coast, right? And then she doesn't turn down a river, but it's suggested that she does go down a river because we were both thinking it. And then she falls down a waterfall. Now, my understanding is that rivers flow out to the sea and they go down following gravity. So how is she going up a river and then falls down a waterfall without this somehow draining the sea?
To be fair, I hadn't picked that out, but that whole sequence there for me became a little bit cartoonish with Kiki talking to the insects and the beaver. And then it wasn't clear to me after. So could she speak to the brothers when they're in crane form, but she can't speak to the brothers?
Yeah, Kiki could talk to them when they're in human form.
There's a section where, right towards the end, where Kiki says something and Chiori's narration was like, obviously, whichever brother it was didn't hear. So it then implies that Kiki can't talk to them when they're in human form.
Also, Kiki can hear Shiori's thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
Shiori has told Kiki the nature of the curse. Kiki can talk to the brothers. Like, Shiori had to do so much trying to tell the brothers how the curse worked. Surely Kiki could have just have said, "This is how it works."
Yeah. Except there seems to be a bit of inconsistency about whether she can talk to the brothers.
Well, even if it's in crane form, she can still tell them then. And then when they come out of crane form, they'll know it.
But I thought one of the really good things about them being in crane form, or the explanation of the curse, is that when they're in crane form, they kind of forget that they
got crane brain.
They got crane brain. But they forget that they're humans. And I tried not to laugh, but they're like, it's particularly alarming when we start to transform back while we're flying. It's like, yeah, I bet it is. That's fucking terrifying. I'm surprised you're still alive, to be honest.
Okay, so if Kiki can't talk to them when they're humans, I guess that makes sense. And I just didn't pick up on that, on the difference there. So that at least covers off that as an issue, I suppose.
Because I think the way that they came to rescue her, it sort of implies that Hasho recognized Kiki. It's a good thing your paper bird squawked so loud, is what he said.
But yeah, he's the closest one to Shiori. So maybe like his crane brain is the one that can pull out of it a bit more.
There's a little bit of inconsistency there, that if they get crane brain, then why would they have even responded to Kiki?
It's because there's that kind of lost knowledge. There's this deep instinct that we know her, we trust her, she is family, that kind of level.
Yeah, okay, let's allow that.
Let's accept that. But we also know that when Seryu turns up, this is going to be less of an issue because he can read her thoughts because they're connected now because of the bit of pearl.
Yeah.
So when he comes up, she's sorted. But I think that's why, Elizabeth Lim had it, that he was like, "Oh, I won't be back until the spring because I've got to go to my grandfather's court." Because if he could just come back And, again, you had Shiori trying to communicate with him and contact him by calling out and trying to summon him, so we know that he can't just come when called. So there's a span of time where she's just stuck until he comes back. And I think it'll only really get a lot easier when Seiryu returns. But the Sentinels, I like them as a kind of organization. I think that's kind of interesting.
Yeah.
Roaming around, they kind of deal with supernatural stuff. I feel like they're kind of vaguely equipped to deal with magic, but they're clearly well educated, potentially. So they're kind of like a little bit Witcher. There's a little bit of a samurai element to them, and I just like the feel of them. But clearly they can be a little bit of a law unto themselves, because this Takan just coming along being a bit of a brute.
But he's also like a prince, basically, isn't he? Or some form of...
So he's entitled.
Yeah.
Interesting we don't learn the other Sentinel's name.
No. And I think that felt very deliberate as well. Like, she realised just at the end that she didn't get his name before he left.
Because she's heard that this is Takan, and that's the horrible one. But we purposely didn't see him at the betrothal. His back was turned. And I wonder if it's going to turn out, oh, hello, cousin, who is also called Takan. And it's going to turn out, oh, you're Takan. Oh, right. Well, so I was going to be betrothed to you. Oh, great. Because going back to the blurb, but giving this away, and the boy she fought so hard not to marry. For me, like, this Takan doesn't seem like he's ever going to want to team up with her, but this other one might. And if it turns out that it was actually a case of misunderstood identity, then maybe...
Yeah, I hadn't thought of that.
There's got to be a reason why she hasn't introduced the name, but purposely done that one, and we now think of him as the brute who's horrible.
Yeah. But, again, could be a classic softening of a... horrible love interest. But I mean, it felt like with the Sentinel whose name we didn't get, the cousin, their fingers touched and there was this kind of electricity moment of excitement there where it implied an attraction. Again, opportunities for it to be very stereotypical or to subvert what we expect.
I'm intrigued about the letter about the poisoning with the 4 breaths as a poison. Like, who's that from? She's very quick to say, oh, he's not anything to do with this. Is something he's investigating, so that we know that most likely it's not the nice Sentinel. But and in very little ways we got a sense that he was very competent. Like, he's gentle, he's artistic, he does the sketching, but also he found the slipper and he recognized the quality of the slipper and was like, even though this is rags, I know this is from a princess.
I think we're supposed to trust his instincts as well because of the way he deals with Mrs. Dynan.
Yeah.
He's quite dismissive. He doesn't want to talk to her, but that's not a general rule for the way he interacts with everyone because he gives Shiori much more of his time and sympathy. So it's like he doesn't trust Mrs. Dynan. He doesn't want to have a conversation with her. He doesn't want to tell her what he's doing or where he's been or where he's going. But he's much more open with Shiori. There's an obvious thing there, the idea that we're supposed to like him.
Yeah. And I do. He seems like a good character. But I think one of the things we touched upon in all these different things is I'm really enjoying where the story is going, and I'm still guessing a lot. We're talking about these archetypes being brought in, the stepmother, the nice prince in a way, the naive princess who has it all taken away and has to build herself up, all these different things. And in our discussions here, we've anticipated where we think it might go. But because we are in a postmodern world of literature where it could be subversion or not, there's still so much unknown because we don't know how Elizabeth Lim's going to play it.
You mentioned the Brothers Grimm earlier. I don't think you mentioned it in your blurb, but in the audiobook blurb, it says this is like a Eastern reinterpretation of the Six Swans, which is a
it's a Brothers Grimm thing. Yeah. I mean, that makes sense. It doesn't mention it on this blurb.
I'm glad that I haven't read that story, so don't know where this is going, which is nice. But it might also subvert what's in that as well. So, do you want to put cards on the table about some predictions? We always like to be able to string ourselves up in future episodes and you usually get it right and I usually come up with some nonsense.
I'm not keeping score. I'm not.
I mean, this is going to become the theme of this podcast is Sam predicts the outcome accurately and I come up with some far-fetched. I should become an author. I could write my own books.
Yeah, because you're thinking of different things. You're taking it in different directions.
No one else comes up with the things I come up with. For good reason, probably.
I think that it won't be Takan that we know who she teams up with. I think it will be the nice one. I still stand by the fact that I think there'll be more nuance to Raikama. I don't think she's going to be out and out evil. I think she is running from something, and it's made her panic. And she's definitely done some horrible things, but it's as a result of the damage she's experienced in whatever she was doing before. I think those are my main ones.
Okay.
A lot of the other stuff seems predictable. Seryu's going to come back. The brothers will stay as Cranes right up until the end. She might be about to have to kill one or two of them because, of course, she has to say the name, and then there'll be some way to get out of it. What about you?
Yes, so I'm going to go all in on Raikama maybe being a dragon. Did I say all in and then maybe? That's how confident I am about this theory.
100% that I'm 50% sure.
Yeah. So Raikama as a dragon, and that there's more complexity about actually what the conflict is. She's not necessarily working on behalf of Kiata's
Alandi.
enemies. But actually maybe it's something to do with, like you said, returning to be able to take the form of a dragon. And I think I'm heading towards some kind of love triangle between Shiori, Seryu, and the Sentinel, who may or may not turn out to be Takan, who she was supposed to be betrothed to. I'm not 100% sure on that one yet. Other than that, I think Seryu might be quite an interesting one where we get a little bit more conflict about he might be pulled in two different directions between his love for Shiori versus maybe what his grandfather wants him to do or something like that. And what his purposes were for being in the lake in the first place are a little bit of a question mark for me, whether that's something to do with some kind of conflict between dragons and humans or whether it's something to do with Raikama. But yeah, I think in terms of the brothers, agree. I think that's got to be the ultimate end goal of where we're heading towards. And maybe Seryu will be put in a position where he has to decide whether he's got to help Shiori to break the curse or help his grandfather and family of dragons to achieve something.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting because we know that this is the first of 3 books that are already out. So, the only reason I think the brothers would get released early is so they can set up more for the next book. But with this, if it's based on a fairy tale, I would kind of hope that it has a more concise ending and it's just another story with the same cast of characters.
Yeah.
I know I say that about most of my approaches to trilogies. I don't want too much to be left open in between books. But maybe with this one, I'll be right.
Maybe.
But with this one, I'm definitely excited to read more. I'm enjoying the world. I'm liking the characters.
Yeah, I'm also really excited to read on. I feel like, given how much has happened just in this sort of opening 14 chapters, it feels like the rest of the book's got to be totally epic. So excited to find out where we're going next. And if you're reading along with us and listening along, then we want you to get in touch and let us know what your thoughts are, how you've enjoyed the first 14 chapters, what your theories are about where we're going, and anything else that you want to share with us, really. At Escapists Anonymous Pod on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, YouTube. Just look us up and follow us. That helps us out. Wherever you listen to your podcasts, if it gives you a possibility to leave us a rating or a review, that is super helpful. And obviously recommend us to any of your friends. That's super helpful and helps us to reach more people. And in the next episode, we will be covering chapters 15 to the end of 28. So get reading. And that's it from us. Join us in the next episode of Escapists Anonymous. And it's goodbye from me.
And goodbye from me.